Welcome to UNCAGED, a show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Andrew Southwood. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Bent.
I am excited to talk to you. Andrew is working on all the things that will make us better leaders and better leadership team. Andrew is the director and owner of FreshXpressions. They empower individuals and teams to adapt and deliver results in a highly volatile world. And we'll talk about the coaching and training capabilities that Andrew and his team provide. But before we get to that, Andrew, tell me a little bit about your background and really, I'd say, the genesis of FreshXpressions.
Well, thanks, Ben. A little bit about my background. For those who can't tell, I do have an accent. It's a South African accent. I grew up in South Africa and completed my schooling in South Africa. And I was brought over to North America. I currently reside in Canada. Specifically in Montreal, and I was brought over here during a merger and acquisition for the company I was working with in South Africa at that time. So I've had a long career in international business, first with Unilever South Africa, where I was fortunate enough to develop in a number of different roles, which range from marketing, sales, trade marketing, procurement, and then moved on into international export company for fresh produce. The company is called Cape Span International. And that's what brought me to Canada nearly 22 years ago. Wow. And then in 2008, when the property bust caused a lot of businesses to downscale. I lost my job, and that's when I founded FreshXpressions as basically a consultancy and support company to senior executives that didn't have the bandwidth because they were letting so many people go to keep change projects moving.
Yeah,
so that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, and it's a great background. Definitely picked up on the accent, and you live in one of the best cities in the world, which is Montreal. So, Andrew, tell me more about FreshXpressions. Now, I mean, I know that you provide coaching and training and you work with senior executives and management teams, but tell me more about the services and solutions that you guys offer.
Well, FreshXpressions focuses on three pillars of change management. The first pillar is basically really helping empower people with adaptability skills so that they actually are properly skilled to engage in change, because change can be intimidating. And if you don't empower people properly and you just throw change at them, their most likely reaction is to withdraw and to not participate in that change initiative. So that's where the adaptability tool, the AQME tool, comes in handy, because that assessment allows us to form the baseline of, what skill set or what level of skill set does a person or teams, we can do it at a team level, have for the intended change, that they're looking at or are embracing. So that's the one area. Mm-hmm. The second area is really the area of change management or project management in the area of change. Mm-hmm. A lot of companies, particularly medium, small size companies, do not have that skill set in their organizations. So we're able to supply that. Mm-hmm. And then I'm very mindful of the fact that all organizations in future are going to have very strong sustainability credentials. Mm-hmm. And so we help companies understand, the framework that is needed for them to establish a credible ESG program for them to build their business strategy on. So those are really the three key areas.
That's great. I see how those connect with one another for sure. But I wanted to jump back a little bit on this idea of the adaptability quotient, your kind of AQ score. Tell me a little bit more about that and how kind of that work really informs perhaps how a company would work and how they might kind of think about change.
Yeah, sure. So there's three dimensions to the adaptability assessment. The first one looks at a person's ability or the team's ability. The second dimension looks at the person's character. And then the third dimension looks at the environment that that person operates in or that team operates in. So to give you an example on adaptability, on ability, we look at things like grit, we look at things like mindset, resilience, the ability to unlearn things. And so the assessment is able to establish a baseline in terms of, is the person excellent on each of those sub-dimensions, or where are they? Are they fairly low on that score? Which then allows one to say, okay, wait a minute, this person, it seems like they are so strong, they don't have a very good ability to unlearn things. They're so wedded to how they do things. Let's have a look at why that might be the case, and let's try and help them, see if we can improve in that area. Or the alternative would be, hey, this person is not appropriate for a change management project because that's their nature. Let's put them somewhere where they actually would benefit the company, which is to uphold certain procedures which need to be implemented in a standard sort of a way. So it helps companies move people into the right positions. Just using that as an example.
I really liked that thing you said that's really kind of the second pillar of the FreshXpressions offering, which is this idea of really managing and implementing change in a kind of a change-based system. It's really tricky for businesses. There's no getting around that. I mean, even big businesses struggle with change. And it's always, I think of all the ways that things change, new process gets put in place, a new product that is developed alongside an existing product, how that changes kind of the portfolio management process and how everything is sold. I mean, so many layers of complexity. Yeah. Such a great area to explore. When you think, Andrew, you have kind of a front row seat of the challenges that businesses face today. Is this one of the bigger ones that they just are struggling to manage this, or what are some of their bigger challenges?
Well, I think we're in the age of the Great Reset. I think, when you live, sometimes I've often looked back on it and I've said to myself, am I living through a period of history one day? I'm living through it right now, but one day people are going to write about this and they're going to say, from 2020 when COVID hit to 2030, we saw some of the most amazing challenges that humanity has ever had to face at a economic, a social, environmental level. And all of these came together in this decade. So you talk about, what are the single greatest thing I think business society is facing? It is this great reset, and it's how to manage this change that is coming to us at this incredible, almost exponential rate. So that's why I feel so engaged with it, because I'm experiencing it along with everybody else.
Andrew, I love what you just said, because I certainly felt that happen in a very powerful way during the pandemic, where we had almost reached a breaking point on the pathways that things were on. And the pandemic almost acted as that moment where things were completely ruptured. Like it was just kind of just broke from the ways that we were doing things. And there was this opening up of people's brains. Maybe we were forced to be more adaptable for survival, right? And so we've suddenly found things that had always been put on the back burner in companies so that those companies could eke out kind of a small extra percentage of profit. Now suddenly we're getting invested in, and we saw, more technology be rolled out, more data science be put in place, more machine learning to be implemented. And I think you're absolutely right. A historian looking at this moment in time will be highlighting how humans navigated this moment of change, right?
Exactly. And that's why, I reflect on that and I think, well, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of this incredible decade where one day history will write about, what we did do right and what we didn't do right. So
When you think about how this might play out, what are some of the ways that you could see this shaping for us?
well, I think what we're finding that a lot of things that we have assumed to be normal and dependable are no longer that way. I just look at supply chains and I look at, how COVID disrupted so many aspects of regular business. Just one small example was the container flows that support global trade around the world. How these
Yeah.
got hijacked and stuck all over the world, and we couldn't get supplies when we needed them, and how that disrupted things. That's just one small example of, I think, the great realization that everything is actually very, very sensitive and interconnected, and that we need to understand how these connections work.
What a great example. And I'll let you go through the next example, but just to comment on that, it's fascinating how business logic developed, or business consulting developed, which was, let's build an ecosystem for logistics where we have labor in kind of lower cost markets, and we'll ship things to high purchasing markets like the US. And that was kind of like a way of thinking until perhaps almost, could I say, that got perfected almost to the point that everyone was doing. The volumes of that were just staggering. And suddenly you just see a tweak in the whole global system like COVID, and you realize that it's unsustainable, right? You can't have that model. And that imbalance has caused so many other imbalances in our modern economy. And so, I'm hoping that this does kind of force us to reshift that, rethink it. There was a lot of talk, I don't know if you remember, a lot of talk at the very beginning of COVID about logistics, right? People were very obsessed because it was breaking down. And they talked about how we were going to put in these new systems, new logistical supply lines, so you'd have local as well as international at the same time. I'm hoping that's continuing. I don't know. I don't know if it is,
Yeah, I think what people are seriously looking at is the way COVID showed up our vulnerabilities in so many different areas, is how do we build more robust, reliable systems that are not subject to the type of shock that we experienced during COVID. And just in my personal experience, food systems is a good one that you can look at. We're so used to getting strawberries from across the world and grapes 12 months of the year and this and that, until COVID hit and disrupted the entire supply system. Now all of a sudden your food system is shocked, and you go to the supermarket and you can't find some of the things you thought about. And now here you basically put a lot of local growers out of business, or made them grow something completely different. So now you can't rely on the local farmers because they're not producing the stuff you want. So I see in that area how that is automatically adjusting to a more localized plus international reformulation, which makes the food system a more robust system
I'm
and less
so
subject to shocks.
Yeah, I'm excited about things like that. As
So,
as an American who has spent about half of my life outside of the US, I do remember the first time I kind of went outside of the US, and my parents took us on a trip to Europe, and we went to a restaurant, and I wanted to order like the tomato soup, and the guy was like, "No, no, 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 you cannot order that. The tomatoes are out of season." And
yeah.
I remember looking at him going like, what? Like as an American, I was like, tomatoes never are out of season. No, I've never gone to a supermarket and not seen tomatoes. But obviously, when you start to think on a more localized basis and perhaps more organic, perhaps more natural, perhaps even more healthy basis, right? You start to realize that perhaps that will change the way we think about food altogether. Well, Andrew, I mean, I love
Exactly.
what you're working on. I mean, when you think about all these areas that you're able to help businesses and leaders with, what excites you and gives you the most joy?
I think what excites me the most is that these different tools that are emerging that allow one to empower people, because part I think of when we feel overwhelmed by change, we get paralyzed. But if we can empower people to understand how to navigate their way through change, that's a very satisfying feeling. And that
Mhm.
also lends itself to really the other side of the business that I didn't speak much about, but that's the well-being of people. You know, it's a well-known fact that, people who are able to cope well, who adapt well, have less stress. And as
Mm,
we know, I mean, you could do a whole segment on change and the uncertainty of change and how that stresses people out and all the negative impacts that stress has. So I feel like I'm also contributing in a way to helping people's well-being and yeah, ability to reduce stress in their lives by
yeah.
empowering them through adaptability.
Yeah, if you can essentially provide them those tools, right? And the ways to those frameworks, it can be absolutely critical to having a more balanced and successful life in general. Andrew, I'm not a big believer in talking and asking people about kind of the long-term future of things, but I am interested in always trying to understand people's perspective on the near future. What they think about is going to happen over the next, let's say, year, couple of years. And, when you think about this increasing pace that you refer to of change, what's going to happen and what are you hopeful for in the next couple of years?
Well, I certainly think that artificial intelligence is going to show its hand in a number of different ways that we haven't seen before. The chat GBT technology that's come is quite amazing in some ways. How it's being used and how companies are leveraging that into new products and services. So the whole emergence of artificial intelligence, um, biotech, that's another whole area. Biotechnology is fascinating for me. The type of uh, products that are being produced, artificial. When I say artificial, they're natural ice creams that are not produced by cows. They're
Hmm.
produced by enzymes.
Hmm.
So, we're going to see, I believe, on the technological front, an explosion of new ideas and applications. And then I see, in the food arena, I see a number of major breakthroughs, which I think are going to also upset the food system. So, you know, it's hard to tell how all of these are going to play out. But what I
Hmm.
can tell you is the world is definitely going to be a different place in 2030.
On that note, it will be a different place. And the last pillar of your offering is this kind of focus on ESG. I mean, we've
Yeah,
talked a lot about, and I know you work in the food business, and certainly the changing climate impacts food production tremendously. And so I'd just
yeah.
be curious to get your thoughts on that. How should we expect that to evolve things in places like Spain that would have been classic producers of fruit products? Is it going to be too hot there, or what's going to happen?
Um, if you look at some of the existing trends, I've had a big interest, obviously, in California, which is the single biggest sort of fruit and vegetable production area in North America.
Yeah.
And Arizona to some extent as well. If you have a look at just the sheer impact that the droughts over the last number of years have had on production and how farmers there are taking strain, if that is to persist, then it's obviously going to drive up food prices around the world. It's going to push people to produce products in different, will move production into different environments.
Right.
So, that's going to then distort land prices in certain areas. So the knock-on effects of a lot of this type of thing are already being felt, but are just going to accelerate.
Well, I'll tell you something I saw today, Andrew. I was here in New York City and was being toured around one of these apartment buildings of the future. And they had a room in the apartment for people to grow their own herbs and spices in the building. And it was all lit, I guess, maybe ultraviolet. I don't know what kind of light it had, but it was a room and people were in there growing their own ingredients for their salads, I suppose. And that really shocked me. That was one of those Brave New World moments.
Yeah. And there's going to be, like I said, there's going to be a lot more of those coming, I think.
Yeah.
So,
very cool. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on UNCAGED today. We've been speaking with Andrew Southwood. He is the director and owner of FreshXpressions. They are a coaching and training consultancy and business solutions consultancy, empowering individuals and teams to adapt and deliver results in a highly volatile world. Andrew, if someone wanted to reach you, where's the best place to find you?
Well, they can go directly to my website. That's www.freshexpressions.com. That's one area. Or they can get me on LinkedIn. Just type in Andrew Southwood and I'll pop up. So those are two ways to get me. I'd be happy to assist anybody if they want to find out more.
Excellent. Well, it's been great talking with you, Andrew, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.